How to come off sleep medication that has been prescribed to you. In today's video, we're very specifically and only going to be talking about prescribed medication. I will be recording a part 2 where I'm going to talk about sort of off-the-shelf medication that doesn't require any sort of consultations and things like that. But in today's video, we're strictly and only going to talk about the dynamics that I see when it comes to coming off prescribed medication and how you even decide that that is the best way forward to either improve your sleep further or create more sort of purely natural sleep for yourself. And again, we'll break this down a little bit in today's video. But one of the first things I'm going to say, even before we start discussing this topic, is please don't self-diagnose. And it's really important that you don't look at this without support. Now, some people can come off medication and has no negative influence fairly easily, but others find it incredibly difficult. And in my 10 years of working with clients, I had loads of different dynamics, which also involved some sleep medication too. What I found more and more these days is doing it without an actual support system means that it can become incredibly difficult to figure out how to even support yourself at the times when you might actually feel disappointment, or maybe something changes that you didn't expect. So please don't self-diagnose and just really look at some support system or working with someone, especially if you are more nervous about it. So the more heightened you are about this whole idea of coming off medication, the more I actually advise you to really work with someone who's practiced in the field and understands what taking off medication or coming off medication is going to mean, both physically, emotionally, and mentally for a person. And this is kind of how I'm going to explain it to you in today's video as well. So before we jump into the rest of the video, thank you so much for being part of my community already. If you've been watching my videos or you're part of my email community, if you're brand new, then let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Beatrix Schmidt. I'm a sleep coach, a professional speaker, and the creator of the Sleep Skills for Life program. And I've been working with clients for over 10 years to help them not just overcome their long-term insomnia and sleep problems first, but then what I would call future-proof their sleep as well, so they never have to struggle again. Hence this idea of developing sleep skills for life. And I know how difficult it can be to struggle with insomnia because I actually struggled with it myself too, way before I started working with clients. That's very much how I got into this whole world of sleep, and I became more and more curious about what helps us to be able to sleep well in a practical way and create that really great future sleep where it's good sleep quality, good amount of hours, and optimized for who you are. So if you haven't yet, then hit that subscribe button below, hit that little bell as well, so I can let you know when I post a new video. And if you like the content of the video later on, then you can hit that like button below as well. So let's turn our attention back to how to come off sleep medication that has been prescribed to you. Now, I'm a sleep coach. Whilst I had lots of different training, but I'm not a prescribing practitioner. So I don't prescribe medication to people. I always tell them to go to their either physician or GP or whatever kind of medical support they have if they're considering taking it or not taking it or coming off of it. So again, when you want to come off medication, a lot of the times what I see in my practice, it comes from either you seeing headlines that maybe put some fear around it, or you're concerned about how taking medication long term is going to affect your health in the future, or it might come from maybe a friend suggesting either their own experience, how maybe medication wasn't great for them, or maybe someone they know and have taken a similar type of medication that you take. So there's a lot of different things that I've heard from clients over the last 10 years. So no matter what your situation is, whilst you have made that decision that you want to consider coming off medication, one of the first things I always say is go and speak to the person that actually prescribed that medication to you. Whenever there is a prescription medication, naturally you would have follow-up appointments. You would have a treatment plan. It would be designed around all the things you've got going on. So if you go back to the prescribing practitioner, then you can actually tell them that you would want to come off, and maybe even ask them what their suggestions are, or why you might actually need that medication, or how it relates to not just your sleep problems but something else as well. And the reason I say this is because sometimes, whether or not that's sleeping tablets or sleep medication that way, or other kind of medication, maybe more for anxiety or nervousness or some other already diagnosed problem, it's a it just depends on how the practitioner sees where you're at. So you're not going to have all that information in front of you, your medical history, all these links between all the bits and pieces that maybe a practitioner has seen with you. So that's why I always say, even when I work with a client and we make a plan of taking them off medication, I always tell them to go to speak to that practitioner first and get an understanding of what was the expectation out of it. Has the medication matched the expectation that you or the practitioner wanted out of it, and so on. So this really just helps us to create that foundation to make sure that we're not actually taking something away that works with some other things that you've got going on, let's say pre-existing medical conditions and so on. So I hope that makes sense as well. So not every sleep medication is only prescribed for what we would call sleep. So sometimes the reason you might have prescribed medication is because you have, over time maybe, and over struggling with a long-term insomnia, you have become very, very emotional about it. So maybe the medication you're taking is to take maybe that edge off, or decrease the amount of nervousness or anxiousness or lack of relaxation you feel. I don't know your situation, but there's a lot of different things that we have to bear in mind. Now, if you have consulted your consultant or physician or whoever has prescribed this particular type of medication, and you have agreed with that person that you can consider coming off of it based on where you're at, then either you make a plan with that person, or often what happens is I work with a client who then actually works with another person as well, a prescribing medication, or a practitioner. So then we become a team of 2 or 3 people, depending on the situation. And a couple of things you do have to bear in mind before we even look at how I deal with these situations in my practice and how I help people to come off medication. The first thing is that no matter what type of medication you might take, it does not put you to sleep in the way you might think about it. So even sleeping tablets, they're not the only thing that's contributing to your ability to fall asleep perhaps in an easier way. And this is quite a normal thought pattern when I talk to clients about sort of medication and so on. Most of the time, what happens is, over a period of time, let's say maybe the medication you're taking has actually created a positive influence, you start to believe that that is the only thing that is creating what you're experiencing. If you have mismatches, so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, then you already have a different situation. This first one is about you're taking medication and it actually helps you to sleep well. There's going to be thoughts around it. There's going to be things that your mind has formed into a belief. So, but it's very important to know that sleep medication is not the only thing that contributes to what you have as an experience. Like I mentioned in all of the videos, there are physical component, hence the pharmaceutical tablet you might take is in that physical component, but there are emotional component and mental components to relaxation as well. So the higher the relaxation, the more likely that your sleep is going to be better, longer, deeper, better quality, and you feel refreshed in the morning. But we cannot ignore the emotional and mental components, even taking a sleep medication. So how that relates emotionally and mentally is that when you take that medication and it has provided you with results, you're already emotionally reassured as soon as you take the medication, because you know that it has helped you in the past. So that's that emotional component. Mentally, you already built up that belief, like I mentioned earlier, that the medication is going to produce an outcome. There's a certain amount of expectation, there's a certain amount of your mind knowing that it is actually going to work. So all of those parts add together so that you are in a better place. So it's not just the medication itself. Now, in other cases, let's say when you have taken sleep medication or something prescribed in relation to your sleep problem or insomnia, and you have taken the same dose and you've taken it regularly every day, this is not the sometimes take it, sometimes don't take it, so that you take the same medication at the same time, same dose for a period of time every single day. But this is where this other part comes in, is when the results don't follow the same way every day. This is where we're now seeing that just because you put the pharmaceutical tablet, physical, in place, but there are emotional and mental components that actually influences everything else. So for example, if you take medication but you already resist taking it and you're disappointed that you can't sleep naturally, or you're maybe even annoyed with yourself that you have to take medication, again, these are just a couple of examples, you're already not emotionally relaxed about it. And mentally, what happens is you already have a version of resistance to even just taking the medication that's been prescribed to you. Now, what that can mean, and again, this is just a simple practical way to explain, but it doesn't cover every scenario, is if you have certain emotions around the medication taking that might not be positive or reassuring, or you've got mindsets about doubt, regret, things like that, that's going to start creating a version of lack of relaxation. And naturally, that resistance and that heightened feeling around even taking something. And what I've seen in my practice, because sleep is therefore combined, you see a different result depending on what those situations are. So these are just the ways that I could even help you sort of get to that deciding factor. How do you decide whether or not you even need to come off of it? And that's the very first thing. Why you want to come off medication, sleep medication, is got to be realistically appropriate to your situation. And again, the simple way to describe this is, let's say you twisted your ankle and it's swollen and it's really sore. You wouldn't go running on it again, because what it needs is rest and healing. So again, if something, the medication is supporting you, maybe not even in relation to completely sleep, then taking that away or not applying the appropriate treatment plan can actually hold you back from really truly sleeping well, and potentially for many years to come. So let's look at how I would even put a plan together for a client. Now, I'm not going to have the opportunity to work through every single scenario I see in my practice. I have clients who take prescribed medication, off-the-shelf medication, and lots of different combination of things, depending on lifestyle, depending on sort of work pressures, depending on lots and lots of different things. But there are some commonalities of how I approach it. So I always say the first step is to speak to whoever prescribed the medication and ask their opinion about what they think. The next thing is that you have to absolutely 100% commit to doing what it takes to come off the medication. If you're trying to come off medication and I'll link a video below about this trying mindset, you often end up setting yourself up for, I'm not saying failure, but mixed results, because you're already actually not sure whether or not it's going to work. So there is a huge part of that mindset on, I'm going to do whatever it takes to figure out if I can sleep without all these things naturally. And that's very much how I approached overcoming my insomnia. It wasn't about how quickly or how easily or within a couple of days. It's about understanding what will take me to the end result, and understanding that it is going to take time. So when you don't put so much pressure, but you do put the commitment in place, you are going to be much more sort of calm about the entire process, because you don't have so much expectation on how quickly you're actually going to see a result. And this is where, again, a practitioner support can come into the picture. So when a client comes to me and says, I want to come off prescribed medication, and we've checked with the practitioner, and the practitioner that prescribed it is open to sort of exploring this, then the first conversation I have with clients is about this commitment. We're not going to try to come off or not come off. We're going to look at really how to create that plan that's going to work with everything else that you've got going on. Okay? The second thing that I normally look at in this, even creating the plan, is always approaching it with kindness and compassion. If you're approaching it with other either emotions or sort of mindsets around it, and you don't have kindness and compassion, what can happen is when you have a little bit of a step back and you have that very judgmental or critical either self-talk, or you're really talking to yourself in a way about, oh, this is a failure and so on and so forth, and the self-talk is very much critical and judgmental, you're not really going to be able to be in the best position to get through that challenge and recommit to just beginning again. So coming off sleep medication or any other prescribed medication doesn't mean that just because you decided to come off, it's going to be a perfectly, amazingly great process. There's going to be ups and downs to it. There's going to be bits and pieces that pop up that maybe create doubtfulness or nervousness or things like that. So again, if you look at the physical, emotional, mental components, it helps you to actually really see, how are you feeling about it? Is it matching maybe the expectations you had, or you feel like you thought it's going to happen one way, but actually it's unfolding in a different way? But when you actually approach it from kindness and compassion, you're going to become your own cheerleader. You're going to become your own support system. And on the days when maybe you're feeling disheartened, you're going to be able to support yourself through those days and just say, okay, well, I'll recommit. I'll keep going. It will take time. I'll have the patience, kindness, and compassion to get through this period. And that's really a huge difference maker when I work with clients who even want to consider coming off medication. Kindness and compassion has a version of relaxation in it, which means that it can really help to make a difference on the days when maybe you feel more disheartened, or maybe you had a very busy day and you feel tired and anything like that. So there's lots of different versions with it as well. But kindness and compassion always. The other thing is that you have to create a plan. And I always say to clients, the plan is never 1 or 2 days. You've got to actually create a plan of how you even feel comfortable approaching this. So when I create a plan for a client, we really look at, is it just one medication, or there's a number of different things? Is there pre-existing conditions? Is there any life sort of pressures or things like that might contribute to sort of sleep pressure as well, like how well and how much they need to sleep? So there's more and more things that added to this picture depending on the person. So those things have to be part of the plan. How are we going to manage those things that might pop up that can actually prevent you being able to be physically, emotionally, and mentally relaxed as you are going through this change? Change takes time. And I always say to clients, if they want to come off medication, it's often not a couple of days. There is a certain process to it. There's a certain time frame to it. So depending on the client, we would discuss what the time frame is so that you are actually setting yourself up in the best possible way, so that the kindness and the compassion and the commitment that I mentioned earlier can be part of that process as well, instead of you setting an expectation where you might say you're going to come off medication straight away and you don't know how you're going to deal with any other things that might pop up. So creating a practical plan that you can work through, that takes a number of weeks a lot of the times, is what's going to help you create more stability across the entire time you are actually coming off medication or this whole process. Then the next thing is that there is absolutely no perfect way of approaching this. Often clients might ask me, well, what's the best way or the perfect way or the most efficient way or anything like that? Just like I mentioned earlier, every single person has a completely different relationship with their sleep medication, with the way they see results or don't see results. So we've got to respect that relationship that you have with the medication or medications that you take. If your medication is working for you, you naturally tend to have a bit more friendlier relationship. If the medication has given you mixed results or no results or very extreme results, so maybe working one day and not working at all another day, you're going to have a whole different relationship with your medication or prescribed medications. So what I normally talk about with clients is what is their relationship with their medication. And I mentioned these things earlier as well. So we start adding that picture together of what the physical, emotional, mental components are. And whatever your relationship is with your medication, there is going to be some emotional things around it, just like, let's say, a friendship to another human being. Anything we take has built up a certain either reassurance or something opposite, or a frustration, let's say. And then really the other thing that I want you to think about when you're looking at making a plan of coming off medication is that you can always reset if what you thought the outcome is not what the outcome becomes. So this is one of the things I see with clients quite a bit, is if they are, for example, a more of a nervous type person, coming off medication can mean that their nervousness levels build up because it's based on their personality traits. So something happens during the day, they become a bit more nervous. Maybe something else happens during the day that adds a bit more nervousness, and so on. So medication, depending on what you take, also relates to your daytime. How you end up in the night, how nervous, relaxed, positive, negative, or any other sort of feelings will come from the daytime, will come from whether or not you slept the night before or well or not well the night before, whether or not you have had a good day, whether or not you had a stressful day, and so on. So like I mentioned earlier, medication is not the only thing that's going to so-called put you to sleep. If we then look at the daytime, and if you're lacking some of those coping mechanisms or tools or techniques that actually support who you are, if you're lacking those and you're only or mostly relying on, let's say, sleep medication, you might not actually be able to deal with what piles up and becomes heightened once the medication is actually taken out of the picture. So this is where I look at building confidence and working with who you are so that we can prevent any of those things becoming incredibly heightened or creating pressure in the evening as you're approaching bedtime, or you might already be in bed. So this level of confidence we can build is through supporting you better during the day as standard with who you are in relation to what might be the purpose of the medication or the type of medication that you have been prescribed. So let's look at the three different approaches that you could take when you think about coming off medication and prescribed medication specifically. So one is this idea of weaning off. Weaning off means that you take a lesser dose over a period of time. Depending on the situation, weaning off is a quite common one because what it helps you to build over a period of time, and it's never just a few days, it's often a much more longer time frame, is as you decreasing the amount of medication you take alongside a professional that has prescribed it, you start to see whether or not there is positive or negative influences of how the smaller amount of medication impacts you. Either impacts you or impacts your sleep naturally. And what this helps you to figure out, and the practitioner, whether or not it's someone like me who's working with a client or maybe the prescribing practitioner, is when the dose becomes smaller, what happens? Does it mean that you've actually become very confident about sleep and it makes no difference at all? Or it might actually start raising up some nervousness, or maybe you start to figure out that you need other supporting tools or techniques as well. There's many different versions when it comes to weaning off. So I'm not going to tell you what circumstances weaning off is a good answer, because it always has to be taken into account when it's a client with their own dynamics. Again, this is why I say that you've got to seek a professional's help initially, at least, to even decide how you create that plan. The second part, or the second way you can come off medication, is basically stopping overnight. So some people refer to it as going cold turkey or anything like that that you might use as describing it. But basically that means you've decided to stop the medication overnight and you decided not to take it again. This can be useful in some cases, but normally how I look at it is based on the client actually. Some clients are incredibly confident about saying, I don't need this medication anymore. They know that they can do things without the medication, or they can sleep without the medication. Again, so the level of confidence you might have in even coming off medication plays a role here. If you're already decided that you definitely don't need it, and there is no doubt around it, so this is what you have to bear in mind. If there's an element of doubt, that means you might intellectually be convincing you, but is it really true confidence? So if you're, let's say, incredibly confident, I would still make a plan and approach it practically. And you might actually decide to leave it behind completely. So that's another way to do it. Again, often it depends on the situation, it depends on the complexity of the problem, it depends whether there are other medical conditions that are preventing something, and so on. So that's the second way of doing this, is you basically stopping it overnight and leaving it behind completely. Now, the way I tend to do it with my clients is a bit of a mixed. And again, so the first thing is I always discuss it with the client, because that's how I would then make a plan. So there are different plans for different people depending on their situation. But what I normally do first is assess where we're at. We already would have had the conversation with the prescribing practitioner and we looked at what their advice is. The client would have told the practitioner, the prescribing practitioner, that they're also working with me, so that becomes a team. And the way I do it is we first look at building the person up before we make a decision to then either wean off or stop completely. And the reason I found that this is a very good way to do it is a lot of the clients that come to me are complex cases. There are many different things involved in it. And if I say to the client on day one, right, you've got to stop the medication, it's going to cause so much nervousness and doubt that we're getting further away from relaxation even before we begin our work. So the way I do it, and most of the clients that I worked with have very complex situations, so that's why I found that this approach becomes more common, but not the only one that I use, is it really helps us to transition bit by bit. Take one step at a time. Build a person up so that we can actually fine tune their ability to maybe support themselves during the day, their ability to be able to not respond so heightenedly, let's say if they wake up in the middle of the night. So these are all practical, emotional, and mental tools, techniques, depending on the combination of what the person is struggling with. And what I found with that is when we raise the level of confidence through practical proof, that means we measure. So again, I do a sleep diary and we really measure what prevents and what helps. The client actually starts to understand that the more stability we have, the more we actually know that you can start coming off medication, or you can actually stop the medication if it is appropriate to the bigger picture. So confidence is a huge part of this. And so when the client actually starts building themselves up, let's say we put in place an appropriate evening routine that really practically helps them to fall asleep in an easy way, no matter what happened during the day, or they actually fall back to sleep in an easier way in the middle of the night, or even expand the amount of hours of sleep they can have. That all builds confidence. The more you see that there is better versions, the more confidence you end up having. And then at one point, I would ask the client, not every single time we talk, but at some point when I feel that actually we really build them up properly and they seem very stable, I would then have a conversation about, okay, so how should we approach this coming off medication? The client might have had more than one medication in place. So again, that's where the plan might vary. And I asked the client about how confident do they feel of leaving the medication behind. And that's a really important part. If you're so nervous about coming off medication and you have no confidence about it, most of the time what happens is it just increases nervousness, doubt, even potentially anxiousness. We don't want that. We want you to go into this process saying, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. I have the support. I have the plan. I know what I'm doing. I know how I can support myself, and approach it that way. And the way I do it is we then make a sub plan of a 2-week period. Sometimes it's 10 days, sometimes it's 2 weeks. It tends to be more 2 weeks because it allows us to really go through different things around the 2 weeks. And so I would say to the client, okay, so if your confidence is high enough, then let's actually put this in place. We would pick a day when when the client might stop the medication or start weaning off from the medication, again, depending on the client. So we always have, okay, so when are we going to start? We look at the person's diary. Are they going to have a busy period, not the busy period? You know, we want to make sure that life doesn't get in the way and increases pressure. So we pick a time frame and then we agree on how we're approaching it. Some clients say, right, I'm going to leave it behind. Some clients say, okay, for 2 weeks, I'm going to take a slightly lesser dose or whatever that is. So this is very much a discussion with the client. And if I, as a sleep coach, feel that they are too nervous about it, then I will advise them appropriately. And then once you've actually have a start date, we then do the exact thing every single day. So for example, if the decision is that you're going to stop medication, then that means we make that decision. That means for 2 weeks, you've confidently made the decision that for 2 weeks, you have decided not to take that medication. So this is how I talk to the client as well. Or if at the start date we decided that the weaning off type will be that we take X amount of less medication, then we only make that change once. So we're not going to have a 6-week plan when we chip away at it. We're only taking it one step at a time. So then let's say we decided that we're going to decrease the dose, and we're going to then assess for 2 weeks before we make any other changes. Now, at the very same time, I don't tend to change anything else, because we really want to know what is the influence of the medication itself, whether or not it's got a positive or a negative, whether or not it's physical, emotional, mental change. Because if you change too many things at the same time, you're not going to know what is working and what isn't working. And then the client reaches out to me if they're not sure about something, if they need support. Again, this is the time where I very much see that most clients actually need support to get through the times when they feel a bit disheartened, or maybe they're not sure about something. So I'm here to support them along the way. And then once we run the 2-week time frame, we only assess at the end. So I don't get my clients to overanalyze every single part of their sleep on every single day. We capture a sleep diary, but we only drawing a conclusion at the end of the period that we've set out to follow. There's no point overanalyzing day 1, day 2, day 3, day 5, so on. Naturally, your body and your mind takes anything from 3 to 5 days to even settle into any changes we make. Sometimes it can be even longer, depending on what the situation is. So we want to actually allow all that process to happen so that you can actually draw a practical conclusion. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, we draw the practical conclusion. Now, most of the time, how I set up these things with clients are ways that we succeed. If the clients follow what I've asked them to do, and we've put in place all the supporting things that they needed, and we've made the decision for the right reason, by the end of an experiment period or whatever period we set out to do, the success will be there. The only thing I would sort of offer as a word of warning, if you create a plan, please stick with the plan. So this comes back to what I mentioned earlier of the commitment. Just because something doesn't work out the way you expected, it does not mean the plan is incorrect. It could just mean that it takes time for you to settle in with that plan. So please make sure that you don't go back into this trying mindset if something happens, because that will prevent you from creating a long enough period of time for everything to settle down as changes are happening. Okay? So these are the ways that I talk to clients about even coming off medication. And this is, like I said, it's just prescribed medication we talked about in this video. And even consider making a plan. So every client has been incredibly different when this picture of coming off medication comes in. Not every client wants to be coming off all the medication or the type of medication that they might take. So it's very much about the person and respecting whatever they wish to do and not wish to do, but also really honoring what results we're seeing. If the client has a certain medical condition that requires a certain amount of medication, and that can just create a simple balance, then we want to make sure that we're not taking something away from the body, even if it's prescribed, that provides that support system for the person with all the things they've got going on. So I really hope that today's video has helped you to even maybe considering what steps you need to take, how you would want to make the decision. But one of the things I would strongly suggest is have support in place. Coming off medication can be a very emotional journey. It can have doubts around it, nervousness around it, and so many other emotions, frustrations, as well as positives. And you really want to make sure that you have that support system in place so that somebody is there supporting and cheerleading you along the way. And most of the time, what I suggest is spouses or friends are often not the best support systems because they're not trained to take you through that process. So this is the only thing I would say in terms of approaching this idea of really coming off medication, is really consider the level of support you have with whatever plans you've got. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I really hope that this has inspired you, that maybe coming off some of the medication might be possible for you depending on the situation, and how you could do it in a way that is actually create a success for you at the end, whatever the outcomes you want from even considering changing some of these things that you've got going on.